We've done a lot of podcasts over the years with the Site Shed in the space of HR, recruiting, hiring, retaining, so on and so forth. So it was with great joy, and it didn't take a lot of convincing to do another one, which is based around creative recruiting. Now, reason being, this space is ever changing. There's always things that are popping up which can improve the way we hire, improve the way we recruit, improve the way we, manage our team, so on and so forth. And we're actually going to be putting quite a lot of emphasis into this over the next coming months, because for the first time in a long time, we're in situations where, in some places anyway, respectful for where you guys are located, they're post-COVID, in the wake of kind of thing, there's been a lot of people that have been let go from various positions. So there is in some places talent around, which is an unusual conversation, because typically speaking, it's been very much a case around there's never any workers, and all the ones that are available are losers, and I don't want to employ them. So now there's a situation where there is some talent around, although it's getting snatched up pretty quickly, which is why decided to create some podcasts here on how to do it properly. And we've got some great resources as well, which you can get a hold of over at the Site Shed. But this podcast today kicks off the first episode of the Creative Recruiting series. I've got an expert on the show here who has dived super deep into some amazing areas, things that I've never thought about, and some incredible frameworks, especially in this first episode where we talk about that attraction model. We're specifically talking about recruiting in this podcast series, so we're not talking about a whole dynamic of, recruiting, hiring, onboarding, retention. This is just about recruiting. So it's very granular and it's very detailed, and there's some real amazing gold nuggets that have come out of this series. I can promise you that. And in today's episode, you're going to get a really good taste of that with when we talk about that attraction model. Essentially, to give you a bit of a summary as to what it's about how you can stand out against some of your competitors that are looking for the same people that you are. So it's very, very valuable. Guys, I've got to be honest, this is one of the things that is really, I can attribute to, some of the significant change that we've had in my businesses over the years is learning these things, guys. It's really about understanding, that HR space. And I know a lot of you are, really good plumbers, builders, electricians, landscape gardeners, so on and so forth. But, when at some point or another, you're going to have to put on that HR hat, and you're going to have to learn these skills. And these are business skills, guys, like they really are. And by all means, they're transferable. You can take these to many different businesses, and it's very similar. But I do encourage you to take note. Enjoy this show, guys. That's enough for the intro. Let's jump right into this episode. This is the first part of the Creative Recruiting series. This episode is called The Recruitment Attraction Model. I'm Matt from the Site Shed, and enjoy the show. Today's podcast has been proudly brought to you by Tradie Web Guys. Tradie Web Guys work with tradespeople only on their websites and marketing solutions to help them stand out from their competition. Everything from web design through to SEO, search engine marketing, content creation, you name it, guys. It is a customized solution for trade-based organizations, and it's fantastic. Head across to tradiewebguys.com.au/apply, fill in the form, and let's have a conversation.
Giving tradies and contractors around the globe the tools to run a modern business. You're listening to Toolbox Talks from the Site Shed. Now here's your host, Matt Jones.
Ryan, welcome to the Site Shed podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So this is going to be a well-received series and a well-received podcast, first episode of the series, I'm sure, because we are talking about creative recruiting. And we've touched on some podcasts previously in the space of recruiting over at the Site Shed, but I feel like there's always new things that can be learned, and there's always little tricks of the trade that can be implemented along the way. So it's always, I think, in everyone's eager interest to learn better ways to hire, better ways to recruit, better ways to onboard, better ways to retain. So no doubt this will be well received.
Yeah, it's something I'm super passionate about, which I'm sure the listeners the viewers will pick up on pretty quickly. So I can tend to geek out on this stuff, but it is definitely something that there's a need out there, small, medium-sized businesses alike. It's definitely something I hear over and over again. It's one of the things that holds most of them back.
Yeah, and I think, just been for as long as I can remember this, this conversation around there's no good people around, everyone's an idiot. I keep hiring people, I keep firing people. And what I've learned over the years is that typically falls back on the business owner as the idiot, and the problem is normally them.
Yeah. Well, now that you've opened that up, I have a client that told me after working together for a while, he's like, that's it. I'm going to trust you because my people picker is broken. And so clearly for 10 years, I haven't been able to find good people. He's like, I'm the only one that's been here the whole time. So clearly I'm the issue.
Yeah. And I think that's the reality. I think this was my problem for years. I've said it many times on the podcast, like just having terrible process in onboarding people and not equipping them correctly. And then when they fail, you blame them, when in reality, it's your fault for just doing a shitty job of bringing them into your business.
Yeah. Well, I find there's really two issues there. Sometimes people have both, but usually it's one or the other. But the first one is they're really good at their craft. They're really good at doing what they're doing and taking care of customers. No one ever really taught them the skills they needed to hire well. And so there's this lack of knowledge in doing it right is one side. The other side, I see a lot of business owners, they love everybody. Like if you walk in, you've got something in common, you have a good conversation, they fall in love with you and you're like, you're the right person for my team, even though they're incompetent or they're really not going to care if they do a good job.
Yeah. And I think, to be fair, that what you said formally there about not knowing is the reason why I have a podcast in the first place, because, especially, from a tradesperson's background myself as a former plumber, sure, they teach you how to be a plumber, they teach you how to, lay pipe and all this kind of stuff, but they don't teach you how to run a business. And so, recruiting, hiring, HR, that's all certainly a very fundamental part of running a business, which you'd never get taught at any stage throughout your training curriculum as a insert trade,
Yeah. So, well, and there's very few people that actually teach it anyways, just in general.
Yeah.
You either have to go like a compliance route to learn HR and recruiting, or you have to hope that you meet somebody or someone's willing to pour into you and teach you how to do it. There's just not a lot of people that have said that's a problem I'm going to help solve.
So you're from Core Matters. Where are you located? You're over in Phoenix or something, aren't you?
Phoenix, Arizona. Yeah.
Yeah, right on. TheCoreMatters.com is the website. And do you just want to give us a bit of a background as opposed to what the bread and butter is and what you guys do? Obviously, I was just on your podcast not so long ago, so you can talk a little bit about that as well if you like.
Sure. Yeah, I'll just give you a little backstory. So I've owned a digital agency for over a decade, and very typical traditional agency, websites, emails, all of that stuff, lead generation essentially. And I just worked with a lot of home service contractors in that space. And about 5 years ago, they were all struggling to actually close the leads. And it wasn't because all of a sudden their people weren't performing. It was because they didn't have the technicians in the trucks to get out and service the clients. And I thought that sounded like a really fun problem to solve. I actually had a background in recruiting, in team building, in performance management inside of corporate America before I started my own company. And I was like, if I can apply the principles that the large organizations are using to attract and retain good people to the small businesses who really need it, that could be a really fun business. And so I asked one of my clients who was an HVAC contractor if I could help him solve the problem. They said, I got 4 trucks empty and I have no idea. I've been banging my head against the wall for months. 3 weeks later, they had their 4 guys, the trucks were loaded, they turned the leads back on, and I was like, this is something fun for me. This is something I can enjoy doing. And it's been an evolution over the last 5 years to really help these home service contractors, construction contractors, anybody in the trades, anybody that has a lot of frontline employees. It's just really been exciting for me to start developing a program where I can teach them how to do this stuff. Mm-hmm. It allows me to impact more businesses, and it allows the businesses in the community to just start hiring and retaining better, which everybody wins when that happens.
Yeah, awesome. And so, as I mentioned earlier, this is the first episode of a 3-part series that we've titled Creative Recruiting. This episode, which is part 1, is going to be the recruitment attraction model. Episode 2, we're going to be talking about creating a recruiting engine. And in the 3rd episode, we're going to be talking about why hiring for skills is killing your business. So I suppose we can segue right into the first episode here and talk about that recruitment attraction model. I've had some amazing revelations over recruitment attraction models, through, in complete honesty, speaking with people on the podcast, the likes of Danny Kerr from BT Academy up in Canada and Al Levy, the 7-Power Contractor, and all these guys that have got these fantastic processes. But essentially, I think the understanding that, for me, the penny drop moment was as part of that recruitment model, understanding that, if you need to create a career path for people as opposed to a job, because a lot of these guys have these situations where they're like, oh yeah, I've spent all this time hiring and onboarded this person and trained them, and then they left for a competitor that was an extra $5 an hour. And my experience, so I've learned over the years, is that won't happen if you've given them a clear, career path as opposed to just a job, because that's can just be price shopped.
Yeah, you probably heard the saying before. What happens if we train our people and they leave? And then someone asks, what happens if we don't and they stay? And right, so that's always the challenge for pouring into your people, training them, investing in them, because essentially you make them more valuable in the marketplace. And no, they're not leaving you for a quarter more an hour or 50 cents more an hour. They're leaving $5 more an hour because they got a promotion with someone else that you may have not even thought to have that conversation with them about.
So yeah, it's been one of those soft spots, I think, you probably see it more than anyone in the US with that whole, there's no one around, there's no labor. And I think, recently that's kind of been flipped on its head a little bit. Like, I think for the first time in a long time, there is talent around. Like, with COVID, people have been, let go of positions, and now it's become a bit of a rat race on the other side, where it's like, well, now there is talent, and the people that are actually proactive are really, needing to adopt creative recruiting in order to bring these, this talent into their organization, which I think is a refreshing change from the last decade.
Yeah, it's interesting because depending on where what state you're in, because they're all so different right now. I mean, there's some states where unemployment's still paying better than going to get a job. So there are definitely employers still being challenged with this. But I think one of the big things that employers have forgotten about attracting these good people is that if I'm a good employee and I know it, and it takes me a week to get a first email from you that says, hey, I'd love to talk to you. Like, I didn't sit around waiting for a week. I went and I talked to 10 other employers in the meantime.
Right.
And I think that a lot of times business owners forget that this is just like a lead. Like, if someone calls your company and says, hey, I've got work for you, like I want to pay you to do work, most small business owners think, well, it's natural. You call them back 24/7, day, night, weekend, doesn't matter. You get on the phone with the customer because you don't want to lose them to the competition.
Mm-hmm.
But they've forgotten that when it comes to recruiting.
Yeah.
And the same things are at play for the good people. I mean, the people that are garbage, that aren't going to do a good job and you're going to want to fire in 3 weeks, guess what? Nobody else is courting them anyways. So of course they're still going to be around when you get back to them.
I suppose that ties in as well, doesn't it? And I'm sure we're going to cover it, into that attraction model, like attracting the right people into your business. And I think that's something that it can avoid a lot of headaches, looking forward, making sure that you're having conversations with people that are a good fit and having good qualifying and disqualifying processes in place in order to get people to that point. So I'm looking forward to diving into that specifically.
Yeah, so I tell people all the time, if you want to be attractive to good people, or if you want to attract good people, you have to be attractive to good people. So if you think about like those dating apps that are out now, I met my wife before those dating apps were a thing. So if I get it wrong, I apologize. But most people put together a good profile. They go brush their hair, they put on some nice clothes before they take their profile pic. At least the good ones do. And I think small business owners have forgotten, I have to be attractive to good people. If they Google me and they see nothing but 1-star reviews and how everybody's upset, why would somebody want to walk into that kind of environment?
The thing is as well, though, my experience certainly is, I missed out on the whole dating app thing because I'm too old for that and I was married before that all kicked off. But like, it's easy to make yourself look attractive on a dating app with a photo from 10 years ago. And, it's between now and then you've, swallowed a doona and you're as fat as a whale and you're terrible lifestyle and this kind of stuff. But it's the same in business, and this is why, for me personally, and, I had this conversation yesterday with one of my staff, and I was like, remember when you came on board and you said, oh, I can send you all my resumes and, all my degrees and stuff. And I said, I couldn't care less. Like, you just show me what you can do. I don't really care. If you can tell me everything you want, but until you show me. But like, I had a good process with her around, finding out if what she was telling me was actually true. And then I trialed it, And I think that's something where a lot of people fall over. They don't have the right process in qualifying and disqualifying and filtering. It's like reviews on a website. Like testimonials on a website. Like, have these been written by the owner? Maybe. Like, you can't make a video up. Like, if it's a video of the client giving a testimonial, sure, but handwritten testimonials with no photo, it's probably bullshit.
Yeah,
and we see it all the time. So it's the same with job app with staff.
I actually tell my clients, don't ask for a resume. Don't require a resume. Don't ask for a resume, because there's only two types of resumes out there. Those written by people that don't know how to write resumes. And those written by professional resume writers.
Right.
And they're both garbage.
Yeah.
So don't ask for a resume. Make them show you that they're a good person or good applicant another way.
Yeah, it's there's so many you learn. I mean, obviously, I'm sure we're going to get into this in the third episode when we're talking about why hiring for skills is killing your business. But I mean, even there's obviously in the recruitment or in the attraction model, for certain industries, certain verticals, certain trades, of course, you've got to be qualified. Like, I'm not saying that, but I think importantly, people tend to overlook the fact that I hear it all the time. It's like, I just, I'm looking for a licensed plumber, and I'm like, well, no, you're not really. Like, that's an expectation. If you're hiring someone to do a plumbing job, they're going to be a plumber, right? Like, you would expect that. Like, what you're really looking for is someone that has, the right attitude, and that's, maybe good with dealing with customers, and that has, is clean and respectful and speaks politely and can pronounce their words correctly and doesn't rock up to, the job interview with a cigarette in one hand and a coffee in the other. And, there's, just things like that. I think they're the things that a lot of people overlook in the recruitment stage, because they sort of got blinkers on with what they actually really need. So maybe we can dive into that a little bit, like how to, while you're in the attraction stage of a recruitment process, like, what are you actually looking for?
Yeah, no, it's really important. I use a lot of analogies in my business. One of them I like to use the fishing analogy. But, if you've got your heart set on a certain type of fish, like, for example, out here, trout's a big thing. And so if you got your heart set on trout, but you decide to go to the canals and fish for whatever's in there, you're going to be extremely disappointed when you never catch trout. There are no trout running in the canals. It's that simple. The stuff that's running in the canals are bottom feeders. And I see it all the time with employers. They keep throwing their hook into the canal, and they keep pulling fish out. And they're like, why am I not getting trout?
Yeah.
And it's like, you got to be really clear on what it is, where trout live, what they like to eat, what attracts them, how to angle them so you actually can get them in the boat. Like, there's a whole bunch of things that you have to know about being able to catch a trout. And I think so many employers are like, oh, there's Indeed. They cast their line at Indeed or Craigslist, and they're like, whew, at least I got a job ad out there.
Yeah.
At least somebody will see it. Anybody that calls me, I'll just take them as long as they can fog a mirror, I'll be happy. And then what happens is 3 weeks go by, and you're like, why did I hire this person?
Yeah.
And it's like, you really need to consider who it is that you're looking for and who you're looking to attract. So we talk a lot about employer branding. And I don't know if you're familiar with that term, but as an employer, we talk, in marketing, we talk about branding all the time. Your logos and your website, and do your trucks, they have great wraps on them and those kinds of things. But most of that's just driven for customer acquisition. It's not driven to help with recruiting. And if you can take a step back and say, hey, my brand needs to be able to attract good people as well, and it's a different conversation on what that looks like. Because while a customer might be okay with 3 stars on Yelp, an employee's going to look at that and say, wait a minute, my employer's got 5 stars and they ain't treating me so good. So what happens when someone's got 3 stars and they ain't treating their customers good? Maybe they aren't going to treat me very good either. It's just a different conversation.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? It's like really putting the mirror in front of your face.
Yeah, there's a lot that we find. So we do a brand audit with our clients, but it's really focused on Put yourself in the shoes of a job seeker and go Google your company and see what you find. Not the stuff you're paying your marketing guy to do. Find the stuff that comes up first.
Right.
Ignore the ads, ignore all that stuff, and see what's out there.
Yeah.
We've talked to businesses where their Yelp reviews are just atrocious because they don't treat their customers well. And then they just go after their customers on Yelp. Like the responses are awful and they can't figure out why they can't hire people.
Yeah.
Well, you can't hire people because you're not treating your customers right. How bad are you treating your employees?
Yeah. It's sort of a leadership conversation, isn't it?
It sure is.
It all comes back to, I think, that business owner really taking responsibility and understanding that in 99% of the cases, the fish rots from the head down.
Well, I think in all business issues, if there's an issue in your business,
right.
You can probably look in a mirror and see part of the problem, if not all the problem.
Exactly right.
But I think you had a good point, though, about that profile when you were talking about, it's great to use a picture from 10 years ago, but it's another thing entirely to be able to walk the walk. Like it's great to have the great picture and the great profile and you look great and you got great reviews and your process is good, but then they show up. And you've got this passive aggressive culture where you just treat people like garbage. You treat them like they're expendable. And then you wonder why they leave. So there's definitely an element of getting consistent between the message that you communicate and the way you act. That's really important.
Yeah, I suppose that raises another point as well. If you're hiring somebody new and there's a lot of talent that's being looked for by competition, things like that, then they're essentially testing you as much as you're testing them,
Oh yeah, absolutely. In our book Unmasked, we teach a process called where we talk about just pull away from them or push them away. And the idea is don't fall in love with somebody right away. Remember who is selling who in this process. See, the days of the employer being in the power position of, oh, well, if they come work for me, they should be honored that they're part of this company and they should be privileged that I'm giving them a paycheck that doesn't bounce. Those days are over. And so you have to remember that person should be selling you as the employer. And you should be pushing them away. It's just like walking onto a used car lot. Like, what's the first thing you do when you walk into a used car lot? You're like, oh, I'm just looking. It's right. Good. I'm just looking. You push them away until you find the car you like. And then you're like, okay, now you can come talk to me. Now we can talk about it. It's the same thing with hiring. You find somebody, you need to push them away. Like, hey, I'm just looking. I don't even know if I'm interested in you yet.
Yeah.
You've got to sell me.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of employers, because they wait to recruit so late in the game when they need somebody.
Yeah.
Key person left. They just landed a new job. They know they're working way too many hours. Their doctor's like, you got to cut back or you're going to have a heart attack. Then they go recruit. And then they enter into this desperation stage where they'll take anybody that says, I'll come work for you.
Yeah.
And that's a real problem, is not being able to take a step back and make an objective decision about whether or not you want this person on your team.
So in terms of some of those things that a potential employee does find attractive, like what are some of the things that they would be attracted to? I mean, I've definitely got insight on this from my end as well, but I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on how you can...
My stuff's going to be more big picture than it is specifics, but I tell people the modern workforce, and when I say that, I mean, we're really talking millennials and even some of the Gen Xers, they've really given up on the paycheck and they're really focused more on purpose.
Right.
So paying $5 more than the market wage for the job isn't going to get you better people. But being able to communicate to these people how you're making a difference in the world, how you're giving back, how you're actually going to give them something that's important to them to get out of bed for, give them that purpose, that's going to help you with attracting people. That's going to help you with retaining people as well.
So what are some examples that might be relevant to trade businesses where they could employ something like that?
So we have an electrician client, and he's one of them that's taken a step back and said, wait a minute, I really need to pour into my people. And so what he does is he sits down with his electrician and says, what do you want out of your career? What do you want out of your life? And asks this question. And a lot of people are scared to ask this because they might not like the answers they get. But one of his favorite answers is, I want to be my own contractor someday. I want to own my own company. And whereas most business owners would freak out and go, wait a minute, why would I train my competition? Why would I invest in somebody that's eventually going to take business away from me? Well, the first thing to remember, there's enough business for everybody. The second thing is, if you pour into this guy for the next 3, 4, 5 years while you're teaching him how to run the business and how to be his own contractor, he may just in 5 years say, you know what, I got such a good thing going here and I'm running the show and I don't have the stress that he has. I'm going to stick around.
Yeah.
But let's say he does leave and he does go start his own business. You were his mentor. He's never going to go up against you and say, oh, I'm going to stab you in the back now for training me. Like, people really just want to be poured into. It's the number one thing on every survey, doesn't matter the industry, that people want. They want to be trained. And I think too many people have forgotten that.
That's interesting, isn't it? Like
There is.
I mean, that's so different from even when I was going through, when I was going through my apprenticeship and things like that. It was very money driven. But yeah, you're right. I mean, it's somewhat, and it almost sounds cliche because you read it everywhere. Like, money's the last thing. Is one of the last things that people value. I suppose as long as they're living well and they're making enough money to live comfortable lives or whatever, and they're being rewarded. But those rewards become, they're not always monetary, are they? Like, I remember the last job I had within a plumbing organization, they would often reward and give bonuses and things like that to the team members. But it was very rarely money bonuses because they didn't value it. They just take it and go and take it down to the pub, or they don't really, whereas if you give them an incentive like an iPad, or you give them something, practical, a weekend away with the family or something like that, they value it a lot more.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting because there's a good segue into that. So one of the things we teach is building a values-driven employee referral program.
Right.
So I don't think anyone would argue with me that employee referrals are one of the best way to find good people. The tricky part is, how do you get your employees to actually refer you? And so it all comes down to how you are rewarding them for a referral. And I can't tell you how many times I've had somebody say, oh, I pay $50 for a referral. I pay $50 for an employee referral, without thinking what goes into that employee making a good quality referral. Yeah. It's a lot of effort. And I ask clients all the time.
It's a lot of effort if it's done properly.
If it's done properly, which is why they say it never works, right? Because it's not done properly. But I ask my clients, I'm like, here's the deal. Every time you send me a client, I'm going to pay you $50. Go. How often am I going to get referrals? Probably never.
Never.
Because $50 is nothing to them. And it's the same thing with your employees. I don't care if you pay your employees $12 an hour or $50 an hour. It's a lot of effort to go to a friend or a family member and say, hey, trust me. Because they know if it doesn't work out, they're the one that gets the reputation damaged, not you. And so what we do is we teach a values-driven referral program. And unless one of your core values is we all want to get rich as fast as possible, which, by the way, I've never seen, unless it's that, the reward needs to be tied to your values. So you mentioned one, a day off with the family. I know a lot of guys that don't give PTO unless they have to. They don't give vacation days. Tell you what, though, you refer somebody to me, I hire them, I'll give you a day off paid. That's not much more than probably 50 or a couple $100, and it means so much more to them than that monetary reward. Yeah,
again, I think that really ties into what you were saying earlier about understanding like what it is that the individual wants, and then designing that remuneration or reward or whatever it might look like, bonus, to tie into what they've told you, what's important to them, which then brings up another conversation. At which stage during a recruitment process do you get this information off a potential employee? So one of the things that we teach is how to put motivators in your recruiting process. So everybody's motivated by something. And the right people are going to be motivated by the things that you can give them. So, for example, a motivator that I get from a lot of people is, I want more time in the day. Well, it's pretty hard for an employer to pull that one off. Or, I want to be able to work from home. Well, if you're field services, that's not happening. Right? So the people that are driven by that motivation of flexibility, work wherever I want, they're not going to work well in the trades for the most part. So don't put out there that you have work from home or flexible work arrangements if you really don't.
Like, get really clear on what that is. And we do a lot of behavioral profiling
Right.
to understand who are the right people. And one of the things that comes out of behavioral profiling is our motivators. So put them in the job ad. There are people that are motivated by money. And if you can deliver on that, put it out there.
Do you use a certain personality profiling tool like DISC or, Personality Plus or any of those?
Yeah, there's hundreds, if not thousands of them. But yeah, we have two that we use. One is called ProScan.
Right.
And the reason I like that, it's similar to DISC in that it's got the dominance and the extroversion and that kind of thing. But one of the things it looks at is the employee's stress. And we're able to identify where their stress is coming from. Stress leads to low energy. Low energy leads to burnout and low performance.
Yeah.
So we're able to identify if people aren't performing based on that assessment. It takes 8 minutes to take. It's super short.
It's funny, isn't it? Like when you've been in business for a while, I was having this conversation with a client of mine the other day, how when you start up and things happen and you get so worried and so stressed about them and they're seemingly insignificant, as you develop in business, you start to realize these things that you used to worry about are so insignificant, and so you're just so reactive back when you don't know, and like something pops up and it's like, oh my God, it's the end of the world, we're going to go out of business. And then in hindsight, it's like absolutely nothing came of that, or nothing happened, so it's funny, as you grow as a business owner, I suppose, or just grow up in general, you start to really realize what's important and what doesn't really matter.
Yeah. I find that employers that really spend all of their energy pouring into their people, supporting their people, training their people, growing their people, they have so much more successful businesses than the owners who are like, hey, I'm the chief firefighter, I'm going to go deal with the problem.
I'm reading this book at the moment by Jim Collins, Good to Great. Yep. I'm sure you've read it.
Yeah.
But it's basically took him 15 years or something to write this book, and where he dives into the different businesses and what they why these businesses went from like businesses that were good companies and then businesses that were great companies, and what the difference is between them. And so much of it is exactly what you just said then, like having the right team on board, and having containers where people understand that they can do things on like their way, but within a boundary. You don't want to take away creativity. You want people to be able to, be themselves within a role, but you still want to have obvious boundaries, within limitations that you can do.
Yeah. Which is why when we teach onboarding, we talk about outcome-based measurements or metrics. Make sure that you're measuring outcomes, not measuring the process. Because when you measure the process, you're micromanaging people. You're telling them exactly what you wanted to do, and you take all the creativity away. Yeah. But if you're like, I don't care how you get it done, do it safely, do it under budget, and do it on time, like, cool, let them go.
I think I did an interesting series not so long ago, actually, with a colleague of mine, Dave, and he wrote a book called Systemology. And in that book, he was like, the third episode of that podcast series was about, he was talking about how dispelling the myth around, don't believe the myth that the business systems remove creativity. And essentially the premise of that conversation was, I'm a bit of a system nut. I believe in by having processes documented, things like that, not so much to remove creativity, but to provoke it. Because I know that if we don't have certain things that are documented, then it means that like people are going to take up so much of their time, energy, and resource in trying to figure out how to do something a certain way, when regardless, there needs to be a consistent deliverable. You look at, you ran a digital agency, so you understand things like, having like websites built, like things need to be done the same way in terms of delivery,
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that my developers can't be creative in designing the website, 100% do that, but things still need to be done, according to specifics. And so like I'm a huge advocate of people understanding the difference between employing process and then equipping your team to take that process and deliver it in their way.
One of the things we coach our clients on is the difference between managing people and managing systems. People make mistakes. People have differing opinions. People get into moods, like they get emotional. Systems do not.
Right.
And if you think about your system as being the perfect system, when something breaks, it's more important to look at the system breaking because the system wasn't right versus the person breaking.
Right.
So what we teach is don't look at managing your people, look at managing your systems. And when your people don't perform the way you expect to, something's wrong with your system, not something being wrong with your people.
Pretty much in every single case that is relevant, I'd say.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've covered off on quite a few things here. Is there anything you want to cap off on before we wrap this episode up? And we're talking about the recruitment attraction model and how to be creative to stand out.
The only thing I would say, if you're not getting the results that you want from your recruiting efforts, it's time to really rethink your recruiting efforts. Don't think that by switching from Indeed to Craigslist or ZipRecruiter or some other local job board that things are going to get better. The job board's not the problem. The job seeker market is not the problem. So if you want different results, it's time to do something dramatically different.
I think over the years, the big thing that I've realized is, recruiting is a marketing exercise.
Absolutely.
And if you want to find the right people, you've got to be a good marketer in that space, and you've got to, like you said earlier, you've got to be attractive. You've got to stand out because there's a lot of noise there,
Yeah.
And so if you want to stand out against someone that's offering potentially a little bit more money, then how are you going to do that?
Well, I think the big thing to remember in that sense is that you're competing against the Amazons and the Googles of the world, because they all have customer service reps paying $15, $18 an hour. They get to sit at home and answer phones. You're competing against that. And it's important. And you're competing against the YouTube generation too, right? All these people that go online and they travel the world and they take these YouTube videos and make lots of money. Like everybody has that dream of being famous on Twitch or YouTube or whatever. I mean, you're competing against that.
Right.
So,
yeah. And I suppose that does, and it ties in largely to, what you're saying earlier about profiling and understanding, just only a couple of hours ago, reading part of this book, and it was saying how you should always hire people that have discipline, because discipline, people that have discipline, you can take them into directions. You can show them process and they'll learn it. They'll adopt it as part of their, the way they work and their methodology. But people that are undisciplined and people that are lazy, there's quite a steep learning curve to get them to discipline, which I'm sure is something that you deal with consistently, building that. Mm-hmm. That's probably not really a conversation for recruitment. That's more a bit of a retention conversation. But,
we talk about it in recruiting too. So if you recruit better, you'll solve most of your retention issues.
Right. Right.
And we'll talk about it more in the third episode when we talk about hiring for skills is killing your business.
Yeah.
Because there are things that you just cannot overcome. And so those are the important things to be looking at before you hire somebody.
Awesome. All right. Well, this has been great. We're going to wrap this episode up. We're going to come back with the next episode, which is going to be creating a recruiting engine, where I'm guessing we're going to dive a little bit more into some of the structure around what that process might look like. Would that be right?
Yep.
Fantastic. All right. Well, folks, hope you enjoyed that episode. If you have any questions, you can hit us up in the Facebook group over at the Site Shed. That is a private group with 6,000 plus global trade business owners. So get in there and ask the questions when you see this podcast pop up. I've been speaking with Ryan England from Core Matters over at thecorematters.com. And if you want to email Ryan, you can at ryan@thecorematters.com. We'll have links to all that in the show notes as well. So if you want to get hold of him there, you haven't got to try and scribble this down while you're driving. Ryan, thanks for your time. We look forward to coming back with episode 2. And that's a wrap.
Thanks for having me.
I have an important message for a select few. That's not all of you. This is for a select few of you guys that are listening or watching this. It's for trade business owners that have been around for a while. They understand the frustrations of marketing and being in control or not being in control. Guys, it's 2021 and many of you are marketing yourselves like it's the year 2000. Off the back of a global pandemic, we've seen huge shifts in the market with people turning to service providers they know, like, and trust. There's never been a better time to establish the tools and frameworks in your business to take advantage of these things. These things that will serve you not only now, but serve the business ongoing. Over at Tradie Web, guys, we've recently launched the Elevation Program. It equips businesses with the tools and the programs required to successfully market themselves. It gives you tools to re-engage with your past and present clients whilst nurturing potential clients. It creates assets in your company's name with no proprietary licenses. You own these things 100%. It gives your business a huge head start on the search engines with advanced SEO, and it collates all of the programs and all the services you need into one neat little bundle, including things like web development, website management, email marketing, SEO, Google Ads, loads of different softwares, strategy, support, and a bunch of other things. After going through this program, you'll have all the tools you need to market your business ongoing. You'll have a huge head start in your marketing, and you'll also have a CRM so you can continue to build your database whilst engaging your current customers and re-engaging those customers that you've essentially forgotten about. Marketing tools that you need, and they'll all be in your control. You don't owe anyone anything. You'll be able to dial it up and down essentially as you see fit. So why is this an important time to talk about this? Guys, it's important to know a lot about a little and a little about a lot. Meaning you want to be in control. You want to know enough to be dangerous. I'm not trying to give you more work here. Essentially, we'll set everything up for you, teach you the basics, and then it's all yours. It's complete transparency. You'll never grow a business past a certain point without marketing. Word of mouth will only ever get you so far. We've spoken about it on the podcast a load of times. At some stage, you need to invest in these things. This is the simplest and most affordable way to do it. For more information, head across to tradingwebguys.com.au/elevation, fill in the form, and let's make 2021 the year that you took control. Thank you for listening to another episode of Toolbox Talks. If you're liking what you hear, then you can head across to thesiteshed.com, where you can join our community by signing up to our Toolbox Talks. You'll get sent a weekly notification, which is basically a highlight of everything that we've spoken about during that week, along with any other industry news that may be relevant or specific to the trades. If you're enjoying the show, you can head across to iTunes, Stitcher, or SoundCloud, where you can leave us a review. That would be fantastic, and all the reviews get read out in the show. Likewise, if you have any friends or colleagues that you think would benefit from this show and the episodes that we create, then please go ahead and share it with them.